Envase Technologies creates a suite of solutions that makes it easier to run your trucking business. For drivers and carriers, our solutions put control back in your hands with a TMS, capacity and storage marketplace, and rate management system. Optimize your operations with less administrative headaches and increase the value of your time spent on and off the clock. Envase Technologies, driving progress, delivering innovation. For more information, visit envasetechnologies.com. That's ENVASE Technologies.com.
Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the founder of the Secret Society of Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, Blended Pledge. We got lots going on, and I've got so much to share with you today that I can't wait to get into that. We've got Audrey Ross joining me today. She's my trade bestie, and it's interesting because our new episode for this week is the Thoughts and Coffee episode that we did a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about almost the exact same thing. So this is going to be almost like an updated sort of part 2 to that particular episode. So are you ready to find your tribe? If you are struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. We created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in 3 distinct value pack communities. So one is the supply chainers, the second one is women in supply chain, and the third is the creative room. So from the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the supply chainers to the empowering community-focused space of women in supply chain and the marketing mastermind of the creative room, we mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. So head over to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com, or we should be putting the links in the comments for you to check it out and explore which community was made for you. All right, let's talk about what's happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain. So first, we have a brand new episode. And again, this was an episode of Thoughts and Coffee that Audrey Ross and I did just a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about the new year, new goals. We touched on the Red Sea. We also talked about robots. I can't remember. I think it was wearables or something like that, and how to make it easier for people to work in the warehouse. If you haven't checked it out, go and check it out. It's episode 387, wherever you listen to the show. It's also over on our YouTube page. All right. I'm doing this a little bit backwards today because usually I talk about the events at the end, but now I'm going to start talking about them at the beginning. So I am going to be live on site at Manifest February 5th through 7th in Las Vegas. I hope to see you there. If you are there, come and say hi. I'm going to be filming Manifest Insights with some of the sponsors there. I've also got 2 podcast recordings in the podcast booth with OneRail and OSA, which I'm super excited about. And then I've got some meetings happening and I can't wait to see everybody. And then Audrey and I are going to be at TPM in March. Can't wait to see you there as well. I'm going to be on stage doing a fireside chat with one of the shippers, and we're going to get into a deep dive as to what's really happening in business, what's happening in their supply chains, how did they build it. So I can't wait to see you there. And then we haven't announced this yet, and we haven't posted this yet, but I have a new partnership with Supply Chain Brain, and we've got a webinar coming out with Reveal, and that one's coming out, I believe, in February or March. So stay tuned because we're going to be posting about that. You're definitely going to want to sign up for that as well. All right. We are launching our first Woman in Supply Chain monthly meetup group February 14th for Galentine's Day. And we can't wait. Our first cohort is here. So if you want to sign up, we are working on our second group right now, and we cannot wait to see all the amazing things that come out of this group. Next, we've got our Woman in Supply Chain blog. So we featured Amanda, and she's got a really, really great story about building a career in logistics. So if you want to be inspired, go and check out her story, her journey, and learn a little bit more about what she is doing. All of the links are in the comments right now. And then we just posted yesterday There's so much about women in supply chain right now. We just posted yesterday. We're looking for everybody's stories. Go to this post. Tell us your stories about being a woman in supply chain, and hopefully we can feature you on an upcoming episode. Last but not least, I do have the domain ships.com. That's shipz.com. And I'm selling it. So if you know a startup that is looking for a 5-letter domain, please let me know, because it also comes with this amazing LinkedIn page that we've built up as well. All right. So I'm going to stop talking because I've spoken way too much already this morning. I'm going to bring up Audrey Ross to the stage. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. It's only your show, so like,
Oh
you
my
should probably
goodness.
talk a little less.
Well, and I totally forgot one. So give me 1 second because I
Yeah,
need
yeah.
one more update. All right. So we've got a brand new episode of the Blended Podcast, episode 40. I cannot believe
I can't
that
believe.
I've done 40 episodes. Like, we only release one a month. I've been
Yeah.
working on this for a while. Now, this episode is about organizations doing good now. So if you want to learn as an individual what you can get involved in, what companies are doing to really drive diversity and inclusion in the workplace, in business, go and check this episode out. It was a really great conversation. We had some really great women on there sharing about their passions. All right, now let's get back to you. So tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Who I am and what I do. What do I do? Oh my goodness. It's been a bit of a week. It's the pre-Chinese New Year kind of lead up, sort of disasters on the high seas, canal issues, So my name is Audrey Ross. I'm here in snowy Toronto.
Yeah, it is snowing. That's why it's so dark. Like, we're both in the dark.
Yeah, it's totally dark. This country is a dark place. But I'm the import and export compliance manager at award-winning business-to-business private labeling company called Orchard Custom Beauty, or we're also known as IBG. And we specialize in beauty tools, cosmetics, and bath accessories. And my job is to today it seems like just putting HS codes on things. I'm doing a lot of HS codes this week. Just move them around the world, make them move around the world.
Getting organized.
So, yeah, exactly. I just want to say a note on like the women in supply chain stuff. It's really funny because like both of us, one, you're the OG like women in supply chain blog. So you have a lot of episodes there, a lot of content there. Like Blended has 40 episodes, but like there's a ton of episodes in women in supply chain. And I keep seeing it in my network and through my connections, like, oh, I want more women in supply chain stories. Oh, I want women in supply. And you're like, okay, there's a lot of stuff already there. And I'm in, I do the Organization of Women in International Trade. And it's sort of the same thing. You see these organizations kind of try to pick up, like, we're going to start A. And you're like, why are you going to start A? Why don't you support the thing that's already been there for a little while? And not to say, okay, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe there's some issues.
Gaps.
I don't know. But like, maybe there's some gaps. But honestly, sometimes it's like people don't know how to Google a little bit, where you're like, how did you not realize that like there are these like 4 to 10 core entities globally, that have been doing some of this work? Like the women I get to work with in OIT, it started in 1989, so I'm working with women who have like 30 years of like working on advancing the professional careers of women in trade, right? So like those are huge resources. That's huge experience, right? And part of the piece around women in supply chain, part of the piece of women in any environment is we face a lot of ageism, right? So, yes, some of my contacts that are with OIT, they're not going to be on TikTok. Right. They're not, so maybe, there's a gap to meet some of the next generation and coming up, but like there are definitely people kind of working that stream. So,
and I love to see the passion behind it.
Oh my gosh,
so
it's
many
incredible.
People that are passionate about it. But again, we don't want to split anybody. We don't want to split time for people. We don't want to split resources. And we also don't want to split funding, because like, let's remember, it costs money to do this work.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, you can't do it for free. You can do it for free for a while, but then you really need to get support and funding from the community to keep it going. Yeah. And if we keep popping up with these different things, not only are we stretching women in supply chain, but we're also stretching the funding that is needed to keep it going, and for us to be able to feature and promote and let the light shine on the amazing things that different folks in the industry are doing, right? So you bring up a really good point, and I'm glad that you did that. I actually just responded to a post on LinkedIn about this very same thing. Somebody posted, they were like, I want to see more about it. I want to see more about women in supply chain. I want to see features here. And I was like, here you go, because we've been doing it for 6 years, and we featured I think 24 women a year for most of that time, which is a lot. It's not enough, but it is quite a bit. So anyways, yes, I'm like you. I'm hoping that, obviously we can come together, we can collaborate a little bit more. People can fill the gaps that I have, and I can fill the gaps that they have, and we can just sort of come together and move the industry forward rather than divide us. So anyways, I appreciate your introduction. For anybody that doesn't know you. All right, let's get to the poll of the week. So the question that we asked you, and we ask you a question every single Wednesday morning on LinkedIn and Instagram. As a retailer, what is your biggest pricing optimization goal? So 51% of you said increasing sales, 32% of you said being more competitive, and 12% of you said driving more traffic, 5% said matching year-over-year sales. Now, we only had about 75 votes here. So that means that obviously this doesn't resonate with everybody, but it resonates with a portion of our community. What did you think about this?
I think it's a tricky time in the market, right? It's just a tricky time. We all feel it. We all feel like that low grade kind of uncertainty. Some of us are still dealing with sort of market-based supply chain issues. Let alone, people have been, and retailers especially have been adding in new technology, right? So their teams may have been in, sort of pandemic and then technology integration, and then there's still some like sticky kind of supply chain situations, so that's,
and I think pricing is just
weigh in.
And I think pricing is just tricky in general right now, right? Because we're still not really stable in necessarily our costs and being able to forecast. Now, we're going to be talking about the Red Sea in just a minute, because that's just another disruption. And people are saying that disruption is going to be the normal. Okay, fair. But how do you forecast when you don't know what that disruption is going to be and where it's going to affect you in the supply chain? Right? Because the Red Sea is obviously affecting ocean freight rates. Like I said, we're going to talk about that. So it's not necessarily, it's having a trickle down effect to inventory and a bit of an upstream effect to manufacturing. But then, the pandemic caused different issues and different disruptions. And so how do you forecast and plan for that? And so I think everybody's looking at increased sales right now. Obviously, and it goes to show with that 51%. So I appreciate everybody who weighed in on that question. If you want to be part of the conversation, definitely go and check that out. Now, I want to give a shout out to Audria and Sammy over on my personal LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to give a shout out to Itzela. How do I get added to the Women's Forum? So we will get back to you after this show, and we're going to send you the link because we'd love to have you on there. All right. Now, we usually do a bit of a market update right now. Last time we did that, you talked about the Red Sea, but because we're going to be talking about that quite a bit today, do you have any other sort of market update that people should be thinking about? One thing, and this is totally off topic for supply chain, but one thing that I have learned in the last, week or so is that there's a portion of people who are taking their parents on job interviews. I'm just going to let that sit because I don't understand what is happening right now. And I don't understand why you would take your parents on a job interview. And I want to know from the people who have seen this from like an interviewer standpoint, like, what do? Do you ask them to sit outside? Do you ask them to join the conversation? Like, it's kind of a little awkward.
I mean, the only thing, I have very few words, because the only thing I could think is if it was a case of accessibility and a support person.
That's true. Yes. Okay.
I could see that if there was a situation like that. But in general, we do have a work culture that values independence. and people being, what's that word? Self-sufficient, right? Where you can take care of your needs yourself. So I don't know. Is it over involvement of the parents? Is it that there's so much anxiety around job interviews?
And if that's the
That's
case,
an
then we
interesting one.
really need to take a look at the process.
Well, yeah.
Right. If we're
Yeah.
really making people that anxious about it, we do need to take a look at the
Yeah.
process and how we're
Oh,
doing
that
it.
process, yeah, needs a bit of an overhaul for sure.
But anyways, that is totally outside of
Yeah.
supply chain. I just had to mention it because I was floored when I heard, and I can't remember the percentage. If anybody finds the percentage, put it in the comments because I'd love to know.
More.
Keelan says it's the participation award generation. You know what's interesting about that? I found out that for kids in Ontario, that I think under the age of 9, they're no longer allowed to call it a tournament. They have to call it a festival for any like hockey or sports tournaments. They have to call it a festival. They actually can't call it a tournament anymore.
Yeah.
Does that take the participation award just a little bit too far?
It's such a fine balance to not I don't want kids to go through some of the same traumas that I experienced in school, but also it's such a fine balance.
Yeah. Anyways, do you have any market update for anybody outside of
Sarah? There's outside of the Red Sea. Yeah, there's nothing happening outside of the Red Sea. It's all Red Sea. No, there's the Panama Canal still has a drought. So that's a big issue. We've got the West Coast people are rerouting to the West Coast because of course the East Coast now is going to start labor negotiations. I just got an update that the federal government is going to step in on labor negotiations in Montreal. So, the usual supply chain disruptions, the ones that we were accustomed to sort of throughout the last decade, those are still on the table, right? And then there's the Red Sea and the sort of other things.
Okay, so let's get into that because we've got a couple of articles on this and we've gone way over for today. I don't know what is I'm a little chatty Cathy today apparently. Audria says, I can attest to these ongoing disruptions and difficulty in forecasting. Suchit is over on my personal, and so is Ahmed. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, let's get to our first article. And this kind of leads into the second article because we're going to spend a little bit of time on the Red Sea. So if you don't know what's happening right now, there is obviously some heavy military presence on a majority of sides. Right?
Yeah.
Not getting into who is right and wrong, not going there. Just want to give you the facts. So there's been some drone attacks, which is quite interesting. There's been 24 cargo ships, I believe, attacked since November.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And the costs have doubled. So, and that's mostly because of higher insurance rates. So if your container is on a vessel that's going through the Red Sea, there's higher insurance rates for that. And so if you are not communicating with your insurance provider and you don't know from your carrier that your container is going through the Red Sea, you might not be covered for insurance if you are not communicating that. So be very careful with that because obviously the costs of goods, you do not want to lose that container one way or another. It's obviously the costs are going up because of longer routes as well. And they're saying that $200 billion in goods have been rerouted, which could equal to a global inflation rate of 0.5%. So what did you think about this particular article? The second article goes into a lot more detail. So we'll only spend about a minute or so on this one, then we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen anything, this article is a great one to catch you up on the situation, and it gives you some of the numbers around what's happening. And it really just outlines that this is a headache for most shippers, especially if you're shipping on that routing. The cost going up, that's been the trickiest part, because it's been very inconsistent, and a lot of it's been rumor. Right. So the trend in our maritime industry is like when people see a disruption, everybody responds, oh, they're just going to raise the prices. Right. The prices are going to go up. There's going to be a surcharge. They're going to implement a surcharge. And then the reality of that is like, I haven't seen any surcharges yet.
Right. Yet is the key word there, though.
Yet is the key, like, because it's usually based on the date of the vessel sailing. But you're like they were talking, it's going to be $2,000. A container could cost $10,000. You're like, the other problem is it's like right by Chinese New Year, and the prices usually creep up due to the capacity issues pre-Chinese New
Anyways,
Year anyways. So it's been just very hard to
navigate.
distinguish between the costs.
Yeah.
But like, is it chatty? Is it this? Is it that? Like, you know, it's like being 40. Is it this? Is it a headache? Is it I slept wrong? Is it COVID? Is it like, I don't know. Right. So it's one of those where it's just everybody's just sort of living in this very uncertain world. Thank goodness for, you know, like this gives you some of the details. Lars Jensen, of course, over on LinkedIn has like the day-to-day updates and like really, really gets into the fine details, but it's not fun. How about that?
The aches and pains of being in your 40s.
Yeah.
How did you know? Are you in my head right now? No, I'm just kidding.
It's all of us. It's a 40, 50, 30, 22. It doesn't matter. You slept wrong, you're out of the game.
Now I'm looking at red light therapy. Anyways, Alexander says good morning over on my personal, and Audrey says well said, Audrey. So let's get to the second article because it's still the same topic, but it goes into a lot more detail. I can't remember where I got this article from. I know it's FreightWaves, but I saw it on somebody's LinkedIn. And I'm really glad that I grabbed this article because I think it's interesting as they take a look at the history of trade. And they start the article talking about how the table that you're sitting at or the desk that you're sitting at right now has been shipped, right? You spent $200 on it, let's say, and it's gone from Asia into a warehouse in Chicago, and then it was trucked to a store, and then you bought it from the store and you brought it home. And that's really supply chain. And we talk about this all the time, is that everything around us has to do with supply chain. And then they talk about the history. So 1956, they said there wasn't international trade in 1956. And theoretically, that's not that long ago. People were shopping and manufacturing locally. By the end of the 20th century, everything went global. And but what they're saying is much of human history when it comes to international trade has been I think in the beginning, there was pirates, there was all sorts of things that we're kind of facing right now. But we've had this period of no like frictionless trade that everybody has gotten used to prior to the pandemic. And now, obviously, after the pandemic, there's all sorts of different disruptions, and we are no more in that frictionless trade period. And then it goes into the Red Sea and what's happening in the Red Sea. And 25% of vessels are diverting. 75% are saying that there's a rate increase, but you haven't seen one. So like that, I don't know about the numbers.
Increases, but
okay. And then they said that 50 to 100% of costs are going to go up by the end of January. And they're saying that Asia to Europe has already gone up 200% from a cost perspective. Now, but what they also do is they take it into perspective. So if you've got a weekly sailing from Asia to Europe, right now, with all of the diversions and the different things that they need to do, they actually need to add 3 new ships to a schedule to accommodate all of these disruptions. So when we talk about disruptions, we talk about, sort of what's happening in the day-to-day for the supply chain professional, what it means to the end consumer. But what we don't take into effect is the reorganization of schedules that the carriers need to go through to plan to get through this disruption. And so all we're kind of focused on is cost, really, right? And the costs going up, the rates going up, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes so that you can be sitting at that desk. You can upgrade your table. You can upgrade your iPhone, et cetera, for us to move through some of these disruptions. And I thought that was so interesting.
I mean, Rachel Premack does a great job. She really covers a lot of the history, and that's her jam. Like she's fascinated by this industry, which I think a lot of us are. So it's a great take on the situation. And I've seen costs go from, I think I was paying maybe $1,850, $2,000 for a container a month ago, and now it's $6,450. Those are in US dollars as of today. But again, it's hard to identify, is that pre-Chinese New Year volume increase, or is it directly Red Sea, right? So it's hard to attribute that, and I'll leave a better expert than me to do that. I think yes, people focus on the cost. I think people, again, that's a very reactionary thing that our industry does. And
Mhm.
I think if you look to other people who get it, I'm not worried. The cost is the cost. Like that's an issue. You obviously want to have more consistency. What I'm worried about when this first happened was, what is the extra 15 days due to the circuit?
Yeah.
Because it was the first week of January. Chinese New Year is February 10th, which means your last vessels are going out week 4, week 5, last week of January, first week of February. Where are the vessels if they're still in Europe in week 2?
Right.
They're not coming back to China in time, right? So
Right.
like, it's like, are we going to have access? Are we going to have to use another carrier? Are we going to have, like, how much work am I? It's all about me.
Yeah.
How much work am I going to have to do to try and like rejig this? Because there will be nothing there. And
Yeah.
like, luckily there have been things that have come back. I don't know what kind of adjustments they've been making, but I've been managing to get bookings out on the 28th, 29th, and 30th of January. So that's great. There'll be a period of the blank sailing. So maybe that will reset some things. That's what everybody hopes. Everybody, it's like, oh, Chinese New Year, we reset everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's where, that timing is the big thing. And the piece that kind of Rachel touches on, there was international trade. It was between countries.
Right.
It was between the largest of the large retailers, right? You might have had inputs for a major corporation. Rich people were shipping things back and forth because they were traveling back and forth. The rest of us weren't. And now we're in a situation post 56, you've got containers coming into place. So you can move things better than we
Mhm.
could before, which is, that sort of container revolution, which there's books on that and it's fascinating. But then now we're into like, I can literally sell something to you in another country using courier. And like, that's exploded this whole
Mhm.
idea of like, cross trade, and the internet has just expanded that reach. So
Yeah.
there's a
So
lot.
it is a lot. And one of the other things that they talked about is to think about inventory. So
Yeah.
during the pandemic, we talked about just in time versus just in case. They're
Yeah.
saying we're back there, right? Just in time
Yeah.
versus just in case. You want to take a look at your inventory,
Yeah.
and that we're crossing our fingers that this isn't going to send supply chain into chaos. Because when I talk about, schedules having to be reorganized,
Yeah.
I think back to the pandemic where full container loads of product were being sent to different parts of the world, and empty containers were sitting there
Sitting.
because the vessels weren't coming back to pick them up. And so we had a
Yeah.
container shortage.
Yeah.
And so these are just some of the challenges that obviously we as a community face in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
And it impacts us all in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely something that we need to keep talking about. I know Eric Johnson actually did a really good update on his LogTech Live on Friday. So if you
That was a good
missed that,
episode.
it's over on the Let's Talk Supply Chain YouTube, because he was talking about it as well. And we'll continue to talk about it. I think you're going to be back on, excuse me, Thoughts and Coffee in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it. Now, we only have 1 minute left, and I
Oh, yeah.
really wanted to bring this article. So Chipotle's love of robots continues with autonomous farming. Now, so they have a Chippy robot, which does tortilla chips. They have
Right.
Autocado that does guacamole.
Autocado.
They have
Autocado.
I know. The names that people come up with for
Autocado.
technology. I mean, and robots. I mean,
Genius.
they have a robot to assemble salads and bowls. And now they have robots that are doing the farming.
Of course.
And there's a variety of different reasons why we want that to happen. One of them is sustainable farming, or it makes farming more sustainable. And the next thing on their list to tackle is fertilizer. So I would highly recommend that you go and check out this article. It's very, very, very short.
Yeah.
But what it does
But
is
it's
it
fun.
gives you an idea of what we're looking at as far as robots in not only supply chain, right? Not only in the restaurant industry, in the food industry, what it's going to mean for supply chain. How are we going to integrate that into supply chain? Because we are an arm of what they are doing. And it'll be interesting to see, what that's going to do for both industries. What did you think about this really quickly before we go?
I think like anything we see with new technologies and new strategies, it's innovative. It's very innovative and inventive how to use this as a resource to have a bigger impact and make, sort of process improvements. So anyone wants to, maybe I'm not going to adopt, robots tomorrow, but it really gives you that sort of like an aspirational view of what this technology can do. So
absolutely. And we've got Mandeep over on my personal LinkedIn. We've got a huge conversation happening right now. So we'll continue the updates and the conversation about the Red Sea. I think it's important. I think it's top of mind for everybody. And we want to do that. So thank you all for joining us today. I will be back next week, and I've got Christine Barnhart from Newology, and we've got a really big announcement happening next Tuesday. So we'll see you back here at 10 a.m. Eastern next Tuesday. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thanks, Sarah.